Good afternoon to you. Mark Suttoth, HurricaneTrack.com here. It's Thursday, the 6th of July, 2023. You've tuned into the Hurricane Outlook and discussion. On today's update, the new forecast from Colorado State University gaining a lot of traction out there across social media, and rightfully so, because it is now explicitly calling for an above-average hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin. Will that forecast hold up against the budding El Nino? We shall see. I don't know the answers for sure. We're going to have to stay tuned. It's like a drama that will play out in slow time over the next several months. So let's take a look at Phil, Dr. Klotzbach's forecast, he and his team, and break it down for you. So here it is from the man himself, Colorado State University. They've been doing this for several decades, some years better than others. And we're not going to debate the usefulness of seasonal forecasts, not right now anyway. We're going to point out what the forecast is and what it means for you. That's the bottom line. I want you to ask yourself, why should I care? And that is what I will explain. All right? So first of all, looking at the nice infographic, the forecast is for 18 total named storms. We've already had 3 with Arlene, Brett, and Cindy, so we have 15 more to go. 9 hurricanes are forecast to develop. We haven't had any yet, so we still have a full 9 hurricanes to go. Of those 9, 4 are forecast to be intense or major hurricanes. And then the ACE score, I talk about that a lot, 160 against the last 30 years. That is almost 40 points higher than average. And then this is really important too. The ACE west of 60 degrees longitude, 82. That's a lot of points west of 60 longitude, and that's where almost all of us live that really have a vested interest in a forecast such as this. So what does it mean for you? Well, let me just address a couple of things. The numbers are interesting. They are important. I talk about often also on these updates how us humans have a need to classify many different things in our lives, and it makes a lot of sense. And so beyond these numbers, what does it mean? Well, it means there's a higher chance of impacts than average. Yes, it could only take 1, and we don't know where that 1 is going to be, but it could also be 4 or 6. We just don't know. And yes, just tropical storms or Category 1 hurricanes can inflict a lot of pain and suffering upon you. So don't look at the robustness of the forecast as a reason to do something, learn more, do more, maybe prepare more. Look at it as a reason to say, I'm going to pay more attention and be ready when the time comes, because these numbers do suggest the probability of more impacts is higher. And that's what we are most concerned with, are the impacts. These numbers don't tell us about those impacts. Now, I know most of you know that, but I'm just reiterating it. We don't want to put too much into what these numbers say, because at the end of the day, it's about impact, 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 and that would be from wind, rain. Too much rain can lead to flooding, freshwater flooding. Storm surge, of course, a major destructive force. I have spent a good deal of my career documenting the effects of storm surge. And then, of course, there's your downburst, maybe a tornado or 2 or more, depending on the environment that a tropical cyclone is coming into. So those are the impacts. That's what we need to be focusing on. We call it SWIFT. We came up with that acronym. Surge, the water, and the wind, and the rain, and all of that. That's part of that, all right? So surge, wind, inland flooding, and tornadoes, those are the impacts you need to be concerned with. These numbers mean those impacts could be easier to come by, so to speak. All right, so let's look at more from Dr. Klotzbach. What are the reasons? You know, there are reasons, and they've developed all kinds of modeling and hindcast where you can go back and say, okay, what in the past led to active seasons, and do we see that now? It's kind of like fingerprinting and understanding how to catch a criminal, you know, and developing a criminal profile, a very similar way of looking at the weather. We call it analogs and hindcast skill. It's a whole art. It really is. So here, this tweet from Dr. Klotzbach, large swaths of the tropical and subtropical Atlantic are at record warm levels, favoring Atlantic hurricane activity. We know that this has happened in the past. typically when we get a very busy season, something causes it. And we can go back and look and see what those causes were. And using computers and archival methods, we can go back and see much easier than ever before. So it's easy for, well, I say it's easy, it's probably still pretty difficult. A lot of thought goes into it. But the visualization part is easy. We can understand on the right, let me get rid of me so we can look at this better. This is your correlation. This is typically what we see when we're going to have a very busy hurricane season and how it matches up. And then this is the reality over here. This is what it looks like now, and this is what it looks like, the rank correlation, when you have the June annual Atlantic ACE index. That's what you would look for a very, very busy season. This is kind of like your fingerprint. This is a match to that fingerprint. It's clear, you know. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to happen. You got to be very careful with this. We could still end up with not much activity. We don't know for sure. But the data suggests quite the busy season overall. There was a couple of other tweets that I did want to show you. This was interesting as well. Analogs, I just talked about that. When in the past have we seen something similar to the setup that we have now? All right? And we can go back and we can pull all kinds of data, and he does that, his team does that. Other entities that make these forecasts do very similar things. There's a lot of seasonal forecasts put out by a lot of different agencies and private weather companies and so forth. But looking specifically at what Dr. Klotzbach and his team do, the August through October sea surface temperature anomalies in the Colorado State 6 analog years for 2023, they picked 6 of them, are 1951, impactful year but not a very busy season. 1969 was a busy season and it gave us Camille. I don't really remember much about 87, honestly. I wasn't living on the coast that year. I was actually living in Las Vegas. Story for another day, or it's in our podcasts, Stories from the Hurricane Highway on Patreon. Hint, hint. 04, come on, we all remember that. 05, we remember that even more. And then, interestingly enough, 06, which was thought to be a really big season early, and then it ended up not being much of a big season at all. And we did have an El Nino that was coming on in 2006. But a huge part of this is this last sentence or so. Analogs selected based on El Nino and above normal sea surface temperatures in the tropical Atlantic for August through October. 2005 was not an El Nino year, but was extremely warm in the Atlantic. So it's interesting to see 04 and 05 thrown in there, and 69 as well. But some of these other years not quite as busy. So, you know, want to keep it fair and make sure we look at all of the statistics here, not just the ones that say, hey, busy season, watch my videos, like my video. No. We just want to show you the evidence, and the evidence points towards a busy season. But it doesn't mean, I got to keep emphasizing that, there is still room for gigantic failure in terms of some of these forecast methods. Because, hey, we don't know for sure. Nothing's certain until it happens. Now, we do have the El Nino. We've talked about that ad nauseum here. The El Nino is upon us. And it's interesting, there's different methodologies for looking at forecasts for El Nino. You've got the CFS, Climate Forecast System from the U.S. You've got the ECMWF, which is pretty aggressive, and others from the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia. Many others. There's statistical, there's dynamical, lots and lots of stuff goes into this. But bottom line, simplistic terms, we are in an El Nino pattern, but there's always a but, right? It's kind of stalling for the moment, and I'll show you. I talked about it yesterday. We'll just keep presenting it. Hey, show me the evidence, right? Well, look, the SOI continues to be up. Now the 30-day average is at a respectable 2.24. And remember what I've been telling you. Bureau of Meteorology says generally at -7. That is the atmosphere and ocean sort of coupling together. The SOI at -7 is your typical El Nino threshold, and we have come up a long way from where it has been. Look at May. We are at -15. We've gained 17, almost 17.5 points on the SOI. A rise, okay? That's incredible. I don't know how to explain it. That's a whole other situation. I have to dig into it. Like, why has this changed? Well, because the atmosphere is dynamic. That's the simple, easy way out to answer that question. But the bottom line is the SOI has come up. The 90-day is still closer to that -7 that the BOM looks at. And it takes longer for these numbers here, the 90-day, to go up because you have a larger data set, of course. Then we've got the anomalies themselves. And if we look at the Eastern Pacific, very, very warm anomalies compared to the last 30 years in the East Pac. But the Nino 3.4 area out here, and it's just the way they divide up their tiles, if you will. This is impressive, but it's not overwhelming. And we've got this cold area dipping down into the tropics. That is very important to note. There is 10 degrees north latitude right there. There's the equator, and we've got some slightly below to right at normal or average water temps in that area. The INSO region is just a little further south. It's all nitpicky scientific stuff, but this is not a basin-wide Pacific Basin giant El Nino like we saw in 97 or even 2015. And tomorrow we're going to go look at some of the past, and I'll show you, what did it look like 97, 2015, years such as that. Now let's contrast this and compare it as well to the Atlantic. This is remarkable. It's calmed down a little bit. We've lost a little bit of the extreme warmth, but even that still leaves us in record to near record territory. This vast area of this orange color, roughly 2 degrees Celsius warmer than the long-term average. That is a tremendous amount of extra energy in the upper ocean for hurricanes to take advantage of. It helps with the moisture in the lower to mid levels. You need that moisture, and it helps to reduce the overall sea level pressure down there. Now, there's fluctuations. We're in July. July is typically when we see the highest sea level pressures in the Atlantic. The trades are generally the strongest in July, and we usually have a downturn in any activity. Climatologically speaking, July is typically very quiet. Maybe towards the end of the month we will start to see an uptick, but then it's when we get to August that we will really start to watch and see how are the global patterns behaving, and are we going to get any of these convectively coupled Kelvin waves, these little shots a few days long of very favorable conditions? Do we get a big rising cell in the atmosphere over the East Pacific, and we just get hurricane after hurricane there? Basically, that'll help to shut down the Atlantic if that happens. Or once we get especially to mid to late August, does the Atlantic wake up, so to speak, and just spit them out one after the other? I don't know. That's why we'll all find out together, put it that way. But those are the different scenarios that we will certainly be watching. Now, back to the anomalies real quick. Let's just click over here. Look, remember all that blue that was sitting over here? I do. And all the blue that was sitting over here off the East Coast? I certainly do. That's gone. We have warmed up the shelf water right up to the beaches to above normal levels, above average levels. Then, what are they in reality? Well, 27, 28 Celsius right up against my neck of the woods in Wilmington, Wrightsville Beach, etc., down to the low country, and you're talking Savannah and off the east coast of Florida there, way warmer than we have seen recently. So the Western Atlantic has responded. Now, this is ridiculous. I see it like the last 10 years or so. It seems like we're always surprised by this, and maybe we should stop being surprised, but 31 Celsius, 2 areas right now. One of them around southwest Florida, and then the other one is a huge chunk of the extreme northern Gulf there. Real estate-wise, it's not, covering a vast part of the Gulf, but that's your 31 Celsius. Now understand that all of this is 30 Celsius. That's 85, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. That is very, very warm. If we get hurricane activity in the Gulf of Mexico, it goes without saying, plenty of fuel, the upper ocean heat content. We need to look at that map too. I'll try to remember that for tomorrow. This is your surface. How deep is that warm water? That's what upper ocean heat content is all about. But this is remarkable. And I tell you what, you folks, I got friends supporters, you name it, down here along the central Gulf Coast. I don't know how you do it. Those kind of water temperatures, your dew points at night, it must be absolutely suffocating out there. My heart is with you. Seriously, that's crazy. And then, just to point out the obvious, some of these reds that are tucked in here, like Vermilion Bay, for example, we're getting close to 32 Celsius, almost 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And then some of the shallow beach areas that don't get picked up on this resolution, 90, 91, 92 Fahrenheit. Forget it. That's bathwater. Now, this is interesting to me as well. Part of the whole ENSO discussion, or El Nino. The subsurface is very, very important. I keep showing you the maps of the anomalies at the surface, but what about the subsurface? This is your reservoir of warm water relative to average that can help feed that conveyor belt. We talk about this a lot. It's kind of running out. I mean, there's more there, but there's not this. That's kind of all there is. So I think the fact that we could have basically an east-weighted warm El Nino or warm ENSO event, and then we're starting to chisel away just a little bit up here, and I'll show you some more evidence that that could continue. It's just hard for me to see how we get an overwhelming El Nino. And remember, I talked about yesterday, it's relative. You do have the ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation phenomenon, but the Atlantic's also well above normal, so they're both elevated. Who wins out? The Relative Oceanic Nino Index, the RONI, is neutral. It's neither for or against one or the other. And that is very important. If the Atlantic were cooler, and especially if it was cooler than average and we had this El Nino, it would be game over. We would have a lot of rising motion in the Pacific, typhoons galore, lots of hurricanes in the East and Central Pacific, and we're just not seeing that. We're not seeing that. And I think that's an important indicator that when the Atlantic takes over, it will do so with a lot of emphasis. So we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just think that makes logical sense. So the Hofmoeller diagrams, there are lots of different ones. This is from the GFS operational. Pretty good area of trades coming according to the GFS for right across those ENSO regions that I just showed you. These deep blues and purples, we're talking much stronger easterly winds blowing right across. Let's go back to this diagram. Those easterlies would be blowing, let's use this blue color here, right across the surface. Those easterlies would be cranking this way, upwelling what's left of this water, kind of depleting that warm water pool, and there's just not a lot sitting over here. Even if we did get a westerly wind burst where you see reds on that other map, there's not another one of these waiting over here to replace what gets upwelled when this next easterly wind burst comes into play. Now, the Atlantic, this is all weaker trade winds in the past. See, this is where we've been. Some enhanced trades coming, but nothing anywhere near this. So we might see a little bit of cooling of the tropical Atlantic, but it's still, I think the damage is done. The warm water temperatures are there, and we're going to see what happens, once we get to next month. All right, so what's happening now? Well, not much. We do have 93E in the East Pac. That's where it is. I love Dr. Cowan's page here, his dashboard. This is where, just to get your bearings, that's the center of the Invest. This is a cloud shot of it, various models. We'll just look at this one real quick. The GEFS, the Ensemble Forecast System. Good news for our friends in Mexico. It will be moving away from you. Probably short-lived when it does develop, and it's going to move into, you guessed it, that very cold water over here. It's waiting for it relative to average, and in reality, it is colder. But look at that sharp line right through there. Wow. Pretty amazing, isn't it? I think so. So this is what it all looks like on the satellite. There's our area of interest in the eastern Pacific. A little bit of convective activity moving ashore in parts of Texas. Maybe some tropical wave activity here. And some African dust out here. You can see it showing up. And the Saharan air layer blowing off of Africa with that easterly jet. Easterly means that the wind comes from the east. That's what we mean when we say it's a westerly wind or an easterly wind. It describes the direction it's coming from. But nothing overwhelming out there. No huge, dense, eye-opening plumes. I guess if they're that dense, it'd probably close your eyes, right? But the point is, no major dust outbreaks. So looking at the GFS real quick for the Atlantic Basin over the next week or so, not a lot to look for at all. A little impulse right there. That's out at about day 5 or 6, something like that. You see it right there? Little tropical wave coming along, and it should pass through the islands, maybe bring you guys some showers and thunderstorms and gusty winds. Hey, let's look at it real quick on the humidity level. Yep, there it is, that green splotch down there. That's a good sign that you can at least get some moisture maybe passing through your area. Let's just kind of move it along and see. But other than that, no development seen in the Atlantic Basin over the next week or so. Let's take this back to the start, switch it over to the East Pack real quick, go back to our 850 level, and you'll see what I'm talking about. One system tries to develop, off it goes into those colder waters, and then maybe another one. So a little bit of enhanced upward motion and activity in the eastern Pacific, but no major hurricanes yet. That's important. No majors there yet. The activity is still kind of below normal for the East Pack generally, and to have activity out there in July is not surprising. It's later in August. Once we get to about mid to late August, then we'll see, does the Atlantic respond to everything that I just talked about. All right? I think I'm done. All my tabs are depleted. So let's get this online for you folks, and you can digest it and make of it what you will. By the way, thanks to everybody that purchased one of our hurricane tracking posters. I think they're all depleted. Speaking of depleted, they're gone. They're all sold out. And I've got a whole bunch of labels sitting here on the table next to me that I got to affix to the big envelopes and send them away. So I appreciate you supporting that sort of lost art of a big paper tracking map. I got to finish because I'm going to lose my voice here. So anyway, they are shipping out, and again, thanks for supporting that. I do appreciate it. I also appreciate you tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth, Hurricane Track. That's us. I'll talk to you again more about all of this tomorrow afternoon.